At this point, we've named and configured the audio outputs, and we've also loaded audio files to the RidePlayer. This is the perfect time to dive into the concept of playback control and learn how this is done in real-world applications. The first concept we should talk about is the concept of players, which can be accessed by clicking Resources, Audio Players. The best way to think of a player is as a virtual device that you can use to control playback of an audio file. Whether you're playing a single channel file or a multi-channel file, the player object gives you a single point of control to take actions like play, stop, or pause. Players can be given descriptive names just by editing here. What I'm doing here is basically naming the players after scenes. I'll explain this more later. I'm going to have a player handle the stereo file, and I'll also have players here handle the mono files. I'll show you the difference and how that works. There we go. These are the names that I'll use to refer to these specific players throughout my script when I'm using playback commands. Next, I'm going to go to my sequences list here, and I'm going to create a new sequence by clicking here, the new button. I'm going to go ahead and create a sequence associated with my Scene 1 timeline. So I'm going to make it a timed sequence type and the timeline view. One of the easiest ways to create a playback command is to just grab a file over here on the left. I can just expand out the media files. And I'm going to start by grabbing this stereo file just to show how that works. I'm going to drag it over here to the timeline. Drag it to 0. Okay. Automatically creates that event and lays it out on the timeline based on the length of that WAV file. I'm going to go ahead and double click on this event to edit it. And we can see here that the event being used is called play audio. The file that's being played is called scene1 stereo.wav. We've got some other functions here for doing gradual fade-ins, but we're not going to do that right now. We can also see here that a player called Auto has been selected by default. What that means is the RidePlayer will automatically pick an available player to play the clip. Personally, I like to manually specify a player so that I can manually take control of it later. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my player for Scene 1. We'll go to the next screen. Here's where we pick the output that audio file is routed to. So if I was just playing a single channel mono file, for example, I could just pick the output that we want to route it to. In this case, I'm actually using a stereo file, so I'm going to pick multiple outputs. And we can see here are my named outputs. And here's my stereo clip, the two channels of my stereo clip. Usually the lower channel is the left, so I'm going to go ahead and assign this to the left output, and this to the front right. And I'm also going to assign it to rear left and rear right. So you can patch this in any way you want. Lots of flexibility here. So another option I'm going to pick here is this one called Mix Tracks. And the reason why, you can see here that my intention is to play an audio clip for Scene 1. Later we'll create an audio playback routine for Scene 2. Now, in the real world, when we trigger Scene 2, it may happen right before Scene 1 is wrapping up, or we may design the audio content to work that way. So what this will do is it'll allow those tracks to kind of mix and layer on top of each other for that brief moment where they do overlap. So very important. We'll show you that a little more later. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and click Finish here. Cool. Now it's time to test it. So what we're going to do is go ahead and connect to the RidePlayer. There she is. Okay, and to get the file to play back, all we have to do is trigger the sequence, the timeline sequence, just by clicking this Start button here. Awesome. So as you can see, when we drag an audio clip into a timeline like this, the control of that audio clip is kind of linked to the sequence. So by starting and stopping the sequence, I can also start and stop the audio playback. Super handy. All right, so that approach, we used a stereo wave file. That same methodology would work if you had a multi-track wave file too, which is 3 channels or more. Let's show you how we would do this slightly differently if we were working with strictly mono files. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and go back to my sequences list here, and I'm going to create a new timeline for scene 2. Okay, once again, timed sequence, timeline view. All right, so we're working with scene 2 here. What I'm going to do is grab scene 2 mono left, drag it over, and I'm also going to grab scene 2 mono right and also drag it over, align to 0. Okay, same deal. I'm just going to double click here, play audio, scene 2 mono left. You can see now why I went ahead and created a player specifically for scene 2 left. Now here, since I'm just working with a mono file, I can actually just pick a single output. So front left. I can also, if I wanted to do the same thing as scene 1, go multi outputs and then pick both of my lefts, front left and rear left. So we want to mix the tracks here as well, and click finish. I just have to repeat this for right. Scene 2 right, multiple outputs, front left and, front right and rear right, and we want them to mix. Okay, this will have the same exact effect. I'll go ahead and start the sequence. So notice how, once again, starting, stopping the sequence also takes control of those players. In this case, 2 players, the left and the right. So linking that control of the player to the control of the sequence. It's pretty cool. Now that we've got all kinds of playback goodness, I want to revisit something that I showed you guys earlier, and that is the dashboard feature. So I'm going to click on dashboard up here. And the reason I want to show you this is just so you see the impact that playback has on our tracks available right here, and also how we can see those playback files show up in our audio outputs, including multiple layers. I went ahead and disconnected the speakers so that I'm not having a shouting match with RidePlayer. So it will be silent, but I'll go ahead and trigger that scene 1 sequence that we created. And we can see here that it is currently playing back. It will show us the current position of that clip and tell us over here. We can also see that it's occupying 2 tracks, 2 playback tracks, because remember, it's a stereo file. Pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and trigger scene 2 now. This would sound terrible if I could hear it because it's 2 pieces of music playing on top of each other, but just to show you, 2 more tracks got occupied, those 2 mono tracks that we created, and you can see how it's layered on top of the scene 1 audio for all 4 of these outputs. I mentioned this before, but there's no limits here. You can go all the way up to as many tracks as you have available per output. So if you were crazy enough, you could layer 64 channels of wave playback on a single output. Very powerful. Real quick, let's also revisit the audio output screen that we looked at before. And you'll notice that we have active VU meters that are showing us the status of the output. We can also individually mute channels here if we wish, or adjust gain levels. You can get a little peak indicator here if the audio signal starts clipping. Well, congratulations! You now know how to control audio playback using the power of our show control sequences. Later in the course, we'll learn how to leverage this strength even more to make synchronization and control between other systems easy peasy lemon squeezy. We'll see you in the next lesson.